Hi, fifth grade. I hope you guys are doing well. I've really missed our class. I really miss our discussions that we have. And it really stinks that the coronavirus had to happen during the most exciting time of history that we're going to study, or we have been studying World War II. And so I really wish that a screen was not separating us, but here we are, and we're going to keep on learning. I wanted to start today's lesson off with a little bit of a riddle, or as you know, a hook to the lesson that we always like to figure out. So I'm going to give you 3 clues to figure out what our topic is for today in World War II history. Our first clue is, a map. Google Maps showing Japan and the island of Oahu in Hawaii. And as you can tell, I have researched how long it takes to get from point A to point B. This is 4,117 miles air travel, which is approximately 7 hours, really 7.3 hours aircraft. Okay, so that's Google Satellite. Our second clue, December 7th, 1941. Notice how the 41 is a certain country's flag. And then finally, this man right here. Who is this man? Of course, this is Franklin Delano Roosevelt, as you know, FDR. So you know today from our clues, we are going to be studying Pearl Harbor, but we're going to be looking more closely at Franklin Delano Roosevelt's speech one day after Pearl Harbor. And I know you guys have already read this article, but before we jump into it, I want to share a few things about this president here. Okay, he was the 32nd president of the United States. Remember, we're on number 45 now. He's known as FDR. He was president from 1933 to 1945. Now, if you know anything about our rules and government, that's a lot longer time than most presidents get to serve, right? If you're lucky, you get 8 years. FDR had 12 years. So this was prior to our amendment where we said the president has to have term limits for many reasons. Corruption of power. We need to check and balance our power in our government. And he was the first and only president to serve more than 2 terms. The first and the only. But he had a super important job. He was president during one of the most difficult crises that our country has ever experienced. So we're going to look at what his response was to the attacks of Pearl Harbor. We're going to look at some statistics. We will hear a clip of his speech and listen to Congress's reaction. Okay, so let's look at some statistics. I love to start out with the math when we are discussing wartime. Your article that you read previously about Pearl Harbor had very similar statistics, right? Every resource you'll go to, the numbers will be off a little bit. 2,402 Americans were killed. This is including naval officers and sailors, as well as innocent bystanders, women, nurses. 1,282 Americans injured, 188 aircraft destroyed. And then another fact over here. The attack started at 7:55 a.m. in Oahu, which is not the largest island in Hawaii. It's the middle island. And all of it ended at 9:55 a.m. And so this was completely unexpected, as you know from your previous article. So we're going to see how FDR responded to this. Here's what you'll need for this lesson. I have sent this to your parents. This is Roosevelt's Pearl Harbor Address speech analysis. We're going to break down everything that he's saying. It's not the full transcript, but just the most important parts. So there's 2 pages, so here and here. And then you will also need the speech analysis questions. We will answer questions 1, 3, and 7 together, so I can model kind of how you should be answering the questions. And then to complete the lesson on your own independently, you will complete the following that are left blank. And you can go to YouTube and look at the full speech and kind of hear the energy of the room in Congress and how fired up FDR was about this. So, our objective, what's our goal? To analyze Roosevelt's Pearl Harbor speech. At the end of the lesson, we'll see if we have met this. Okay. Take out your speech. We're going to read it together. So, highlighter, pen. If you need to pause the video to go and grab these things, you can go ahead and do that. Okay. I'm going to read it aloud to you. If you need to pause and highlight, when I highlight, you may go ahead and do so. Mr. Vice President, Mr. Speaker, members of the Senate and of the House of Representatives. Yesterday, December 7th, 1941, a date which will live in infamy, the United States of America was suddenly and deliberately attacked by naval and air forces of the Empire of Japan. What's most important there? FDR's most famous quote from this was, a date which will live in infamy. So we're going to pause. We're going to highlight that portion. December 7th, 1941, a date which will live in infamy. Well, we know fame, right, means to be extremely popular, famous, well-known. And then the prefix in means not, right? Like incorrect means not correct. So if we know fame, famous, right, infamy means that it is well known for something negative, right? A negative connotation. So we'll go ahead and keep going. The United States was at peace with that nation, and at the solicitation of Japan was still in conversation with its government and its emperor, looking toward the maintenance of peace in the Pacific. Indeed, 1 hour after Japanese air squadrons had commenced bombing in the American island of Oahu, the Japanese ambassador to the United States and his colleague delivered to our Secretary of State a formal reply to a recent American message. And while this reply stated that it seemed useless to continue the existing diplomatic negotiations, it contained no threat or hint of war or armed attack. This part is quite important because it says, it implies, not so very clearly, but it implies that the United States and Japan had a fairly decent relationship prior to this attack. And in former years, it was commonplace for nations to publicly and formally declare war. And so this was out of the ordinary of this large surprise attack. And so just hours before, we were in communication with Japan, and it was a peaceful communication. So take your highlighter and go ahead and highlight that last sentence. Let's see. And while this reply stated that it seemed useless to continue the existing diplomatic negotiations, it contained no threat or hint of war of an armed attack. It will be recorded that the distance of Hawaii from Japan makes it obvious that the attack was deliberately planned many days or even weeks ago. During the intervening time, the Japanese government has deliberately sought to deceive the United States by false statements and expressions of hope for continued peace. That's why I showed you the distance map. The attack yesterday on the Hawaiian Islands has caused severe damage to American naval and military forces. I regret to tell you that very many American lives have been lost. In addition, American ships have been reported torpedoed on the high seas between San Francisco and Honolulu. And then FDR starts to use repetition. And he uses the same intro to give an effect of how serious, how deliberate, and how evil these attacks were. Yesterday, the Japanese government also launched an attack against Malaya. Last night, Japanese forces attacked Hong Kong. Last night, Japanese forces attacked Guam. Last night, Japanese forces attacked the Philippine Islands. Last night, the Japanese attacked Wake Island. Flip the page. And this morning, the Japanese attacked Midway Island. Japan has therefore undertaken a surprise offensive extending throughout the Pacific area. The facts of yesterday and today speak for themselves. The people of the United States have already formed their opinions and well understand the implications to the very life and safety of our nation. I think that's a really important part. that it kind of speaks for itself that this was an evil act. As Commander-in-Chief of the Army and Navy, I have directed that all measures be taken for our defense, but always will our whole nation remember the character of the onslaught against us. No matter how long it may take us to overcome this premeditated invasion, the American people and their righteous might will win through to absolute victory. I believe that I interpret the will of the Congress and of the people when I assert that we will not only defend ourselves to the uttermost, but will make it very certain that this form of treachery shall never again endanger us. Now I'm going to pull up a clip so you can hear the last part. I'm going to pull up YouTube and play his speech so you can hear the last part. 1 second. I have to put this down for a second so you can hear. Okay.
Hostilities exist. There is no blinking at the fact that our people, our territory, and our interests are in grave danger. With confidence in our armed forces, with the unbounding determination of our people, we will gain the inevitable triumph, so help us God. I ask that the Congress declare that since the unprovoked and dastardly attack by Japan on Sunday, December 7th, 1941, a state of war has existed between the United States and the Japanese Empire.
If you watch the video on YouTube, you will see congressmen get up out of their chairs. They are hooting and hollering. This is not usual behavior of Congress other than like the State of the Union addresses. So you can tell the spirit and the energy of that room was that victory will be necessary. I want you to look at the fact that he says that he asks Congress to declare war. Remember, Article 2 of the Constitution, all about the president's rule, says that the president cannot declare war, remember? But obviously Congress is going to vote to declare war on Japan. And Japan becomes a part of the Axis nations. What you'll need now, this sheet right here. And do you remember the name of the emperor of Japan at the time? Or excuse me, the prime minister? Hideki Tojo is who we're in communication with. We're going to answer question 1. Question 1 says, what does Roosevelt mean when he says a date which will live in infamy? Well, I discussed what that word infamy means. It means being well known for something treacherous, something negative. And then Americans are going to remember this day, and we still do. Okay. So go ahead and say, he is saying, take your pencil or pen, that the bombing will be remembered forever as a great act of treachery. You can pause the video if you need to take a moment and copy this down. He's saying that the bombing will be remembered forever as a great act of treachery. And honestly, the statistics are beat with 9/11. Well over 2,000 Americans were killed in the terrorist attacks of 9/11. Number 3. What seems to have angered Roosevelt the most about the Japanese attack? If you look back to the speech, I think he's most angered that this was a surprise, right? It was a deceitful act. There were no clues or hints that this is going to happen to us. So go ahead and write for number 3. Roosevelt states several times that it was the surprise that angered him the most, right? We were at peace with this nation. And he considers it an evil act. If you also want to add that it was customary for countries to formally declare war against each other, and that was another thing that was extra evil and deceitful, you can add that as well. But make sure you have Roosevelt state several times that it was the surprise that angered him the most. You can hear it in his voice too. The tone of his voice is quite angry, but also quite confident and patriotic. Number 7. What is Roosevelt ultimately asking for in this speech, right? What's the purpose of coming together the day after it happened? He's asking for Congress to declare war, right? So go ahead and write. He is asking the American public and Congress the ability to join World War II. And you can abbreviate that, WW2. He is asking the American public and Congress the ability to join World War II. He has to formally ask Congress to declare war. And I want you to think of how different this was, or this speech is, compared to where we began in our stance in World War II. When this began, and Hitler was taking over all of Europe, the Holocaust is happening. We've got our Axis powers that have this very different tyrannical form of government. Our stance was isolationism, right? And who better than Dr. Seuss to criticize that, right? And many people did. Is that why are we being bystanders? Why are we isolationists? There are children and people dying in Germany. Well, we had just gotten out of World War I. We wanted to recuperate, right? The Great Depression had just happened. We had gone through a lot. So a lot of people were for the isolationism kind of movement, I guess. But this changes everything, right? This is the reason we enter World War II. Okay? This is an extremely famous speech. It's up there with I Have a Dream, MLK. So make sure that you remember this. Go to YouTube, watch the entire speech. You can hear Congress just so excited and willing to defend their country at any cost. So there we go. Your assignment is to answer 2, 4, 5, 6, and 8 independently, just as we have done in complete sentences. Okay? I'll be doing probably one video a week for you guys. I'll continue to send some work as well. I really do miss you guys very much, and I've told my classes, try to find the positive things in this pandemic, excuse me. I know that you're separated from your friends. You cannot learn like we usually do, but you are really a part of a historical event that will be remembered generations from now, right? And you get to experience kind of a different way of living than most right now. So years from now, you're going to be probably telling your children, your grandchildren, that you lived through the coronavirus. and that people were going crazy, and that your teacher had to talk to you via a screen, and that there was no toilet paper. And that's a really interesting time too. Not quite as exciting as Pearl Harbor, but you are a part of history, and I know it stinks that we can't be face to face. But anyway, our next lesson will probably be more focused on the Holocaust. We're going to take these big chunks of World War II and kind of study them rather than go into the minute details. But anyway, I hope you guys have a good rest of your day. Bye!